Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Gary, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this one is along the canal, so I often point to it.
And today he'll be educating us on the Merrick thread mill, or Merrick thread mill. Tell us about these Merrick mills.
All right, so we're going to be talking about these 4 mills that Timothy Merrick had built in Holyoke and why he came to Holyoke. We'll talk about him too, and his family, and his house, which was a gigantic house. And then we'll talk about what's happening inside these mills nowadays, because of course they don't make thread anymore here. And we'll talk about the history of these mills, how they served Holyoke greatly. You know, if you look at any of these 4 mills, you'd be amazed at how large they are and how powerful they were. And they made use of that great power and a lot later to be the best thread maker probably in the world. Okay, so the 4 mills have the history. Mill number 1, in 1864, Timothy Merrick came from Mansfield Hollow, Connecticut, just with a reason to get a better advantage over other thread makers around the world. He knew that Holyoke had a powerful canal that was working, and even though his mill in Mansfield Hollow was a decent mill, he wanted to do better. And so he brought his family up, and he brought some of his workers up, and away they went. And, well, I'll tell you about the history of the mills first. The mill number 1 was ready in 1865, and it was being built, and it took 2 years to build it up to the highest potential. In 1867, it was finally finished. Now, this first mill is still in place, and it's located on Main Street, right before 391 comes up onto Main Street. And it's between the second level canal and the start of the third level canal. And they have a special race just for this mill. And the race is very different from any other in Holyoke, because it goes into the mill from under what's called South Race Street, and the part of South Race Street that's not even there anymore. It goes into that mill number 1, and it comes out the side, which is very unusual because most races or tunnels that carry the water power into the mill do throw out the back and then into another canal. This one carries it out the side, and it carries it into an exposed raceway. It's a gigantic exposed raceway. And there's only 2 exposed raceways in all Holyoke, and both of them are associated with the Merrick thread mill. Merrick number 1 and Merrick number 3. And so, this Merrick number 1 has a large exposed raceway coming into a special channel that is a spike off the third level canal. Unfortunately, I cannot have a walking tour go there, and I can't have a bus tour go there because it's too dangerous. It's too far for the walkers away from where I usually go from the first to second level canal tour, and also it's too far away from the third level canal tour start points. I'd have to start at a different point. Well, every year I change the third level canal's route, so maybe someday I'll change it so we can get to here. And this Merrick number 1 can only be accessed really easily on a bike tour. All right, so I'm going to stop on this point because the Merricks 2, 3, and 4 I'll talk about when I get to the last point to discuss today.
So tell us about Timothy Merrick.
All right, Timothy Merrick was a thread maker from Connecticut. He came up here, and like everyone, you need to do a lot of things. You need to get the mill going. He had plenty of money to start up that mill number 1. Now, of course, you need a house going. And he built his house on the property is now owned by the Blessed Sacrament Church. That's up on Northampton Street and Westfield Road. He built a mansion there, and he built a carriage house there. And if you go up there's no such thing there anymore. They've been taken down. So his house, after he died, sure, the family stayed there for a while. But after they died off, they sold out to the novitiate of the Sisters of Providence. Novitiate are the rookie nuns. So his house became a home for the rookie nuns, or novitiates of Sisters of Providence. And they owned it for a few years, and then they sold it to the very new Blessed Sacrament Church, which opened up in a place along Northampton Street. And instead of keeping the house for a long time, they actually decided at some point, we're going to take down this house. And that's because they wanted a new campus. And this happened in the 1950s. And so the church and the school, which were along Hitchcock Street, Northampton Street, would be some of my new school in the 50s. And so his house is gone, sadly.
So quickly, before we continue with the rest of the interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214 @yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. They're also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So tell us about the production of the mills in 2, 3, and 4.
All right, so we had 4 mills going. And his mill number 1 was the first one and the gigantic one that held the company going right from the beginning. Now, he grew and grew, and in 1878 he had an addition made onto his mill number 1, which made it even larger than it was. All right, now, he expanded greatly and greatly. And at its peak, the Merrick thread mill made 1 million miles of thread per year. That's an incredible amount of thread. It's so much thread that there was no wooden spool maker in the world that could keep up with him. And so what he did, he bought a forest in Maine. And he constructed a lumber yard in Holyoke. And he constructed a lumber planing mill. And what he did, he brought the lumber down from Maine. He brought it into his own lumber yard, which was near the freight yard of the Connecticut River line. And then he had his cutting mills cut down any spool size that he needed, whether it was a small size for home use or the larger size for industrial use. So he became the biggest wooden spool maker in the world for thread too. He made so many spools, he didn't need them all, he would sell them to other companies. Okay, so mills number 2 and 3 are not near mill number 1. Mill number 1 is on Main Street. Mill number 2 and 3 are along Appleton Street, and they're near the intersection with the first and the second level canal on Appleton Street. So they used the power up there between the first and second level, which was different from the first mill, Merrick Mill 1. And of those, the Merrick 3 is still in place, and you can see it's still a big mill there. Now, mill number 4, he made along the way. So mill number 4 was on Main Street, opposite mill number 1's location. It's still there also. And it was mostly for storage and for administration. And it's a very large mill itself. It didn't need water power because electricity had come into Holyoke, and it didn't need to be on a canal to get power. And so we could use this electricity coming from the city. Now, the amount of production was absolutely incredible. In the Merrick Mill in 1886, there was 450,000 dozen spools of cotton made. And And in 1896, 10 years later, there was 6.5 million dozens of spools of cotton thread made. And the workforce had increased from 1886 being 100 workers to 10 years later, 1896, being 1,400 workers. That's an increase, if you multiply these numbers I've given you, 14 times greater production in 10 years. That is absolutely stupendous, right? There were so many spindles in these 4 mills. There was 82,000 spindles in the 4 Merrick mills. And he would use up 1 million feet of white birch lumber, which came from Lakeview, Maine. The production was incredible. This was the biggest thread mill in the world, and they made everything on their own. They did make other products too, other kinds of warp and yarn, twine, so forth. But their main ingredient, of course, was that cotton thread, which was incredible. Now, the years of production out of these mills, the Merrick number 1, of course, I told you, was finished 1867. The Merrick number 2, 3, and 4 were all made in the very early 1880s. And that's why he could really ramp up production to incredible levels. And even though he had 4 mills going in the early 1880s, by the mid-1890s, he had found ways to make production even greater.
Now, what has happened to these mills?
Okay, mill number 2 is now gone. I don't know when it was taken out, but it's long gone. Mill number 3 is there. It's now being under construction in the year 2023 to have a storage facility. They're making a parking lot there, and they're doing a survey on the building to make sure that everything is safe. Mill number 4 is multiple use, including the art studio, and part of it is used as a haunted house. And it now has a new name called the Bastille Building. Mill number 1 is partly used by small businesses. I think University Products have a small storage site inside of there. So it's great. All 3 mills that are survived are still there, and they're still usable. So if you want to learn more, go to my website. I have broken down every Sanborn insurance map that covers the mills. I have broken down here. I have multiple pictures. I have more stories, and you can read about his family. And the sad thing is that when he died, he had told his son, never sell my thread mill to the American Thread Company, which was a competitor in Holyoke. And what did he do? Within a few months, his son sold it to the American Thread Company. His father told him no, and what happened? It got sold. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, and be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Houghton, in which he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, in this stop, I added to the canal stop, and it's the only addition I ever made.
That's awesome. So today you're going to be talking about that with us. So it's your Merrick Mills and the Races tour. Now, so why did you add an extra stop to the canal tour just for bicycle riders?
I noticed that when I was setting up for a bicycle ride around the canals, that there was a very good way of adding an extra stop. And that extra stop was on Main Street as 391 comes onto that street, it's a very dangerous stop for buses and cars, so don't stop there. It's too far away from our starting point for walkers, and so I never had it on a walking tour. I never had it on a bus tour. But when I was getting ready for a bicycle tour, I noticed that this is an excellent place to see the workings of the second level canal going to the third level canal, to see the workings of the Merrick tunnels that were actually above ground, and to see the Merrick mills themselves, and to see a turbine that's there for as a power station. So I added it in, and it's not on the other two stores. So this is great for a bicycle rider. And I was as surprised as anyone that this is possible, because I thought, oh, I've covered with my 16 stops of either the bike, the car, the bus, or what. And I had them all, and I had it for years and years. But a couple of years ago, in the 7th year of giving canal tours, I noticed, oh, here's what only the bicycle riders could possibly do for safety reasons. And I added it in, and it's one of the best stops. It's visually very informational and very eye appealing because of where it is.
So now tell us about the Merrick Mills.
The Merrick Mill was started in 1869. It was started by Timothy Merrick of Mansfield, Connecticut. He had a small mill down there, which made thread. He knew that Holyoke had great potential. It was actually 1864. It was during the Civil War. So he came up to Holyoke. He made his mill number 1, right on the juncture of the second and the third level canal. Now, to do it properly, you have to have, of course, the water dropping through your mill in order to catch in the turbines that you have, the water falling onto the turbine and then pushing that turbine around. Now, his was such a gigantic mill that he could have large turbines inside there. What he did, he didn't bother to have, when it was coming in, it was underground. When it hit the turbine, it was underground. But when it was coming out, it directly came into an exposed race, or a race is a tunnel. And it came into that exposed tunnel, and it is enormous, because his turbines were enormous. And there's only 2 exposed turbines in Holyoke, and both of them belong to him. One is on Merrick number 2, and one is on Merrick number 3. And he made this system because he knew that he would have a lot of thread coming through, and he was correct. They made enough thread to go to the moon 4 times over in a year. That's 1,000,000 miles of thread per year. And he was the greatest thread maker in the world. He made so much thread that he had to buy his own forest, and just to make the wooden spools that the thread would put onto, and sold from there. So he had a lumber yard in Holyoke, and he actually was a wooden spool dealer, where he'd deal out to other thread makers his wooden spools. Plus, he made his thread and put it on. He sold at either an industrial level and a personal level, both. So he was a great worker. He started the Merrick 1 right away. The Merrick 2 and 3 were up on the first and second level canal, with the 3 still being in place. The 1 still is in place. The Merrick 4 came much later, and that one is still in place, and it's actually used as a haunted house.
Now, so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour, also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. They are perfect for fun, educational outdoor activities for the whole family, or for group parties, especially those special occasion get-togethers. They are also good for getting outdoors for the day to get out. Getting back to our interview, now how can people get to the stop?
Best way to get to that stop, if you go to the stop on South Race Street, where the second level canal goes into the third level canal, you can always cut onto South Street and walk down from there and onto Main Street and just walk north on Main Street, only a bit, only 100 yards on South Street and 100 yards on Main Street. And then you reach a place where it's a third level canal on both sides of the street. And if you walk a little bit more up, you'll see the race coming in from the north. That was the enormous tunnel or race that Merrick had for their power stations. You also see a small one coming into this race, which is used industrially now by Holyoke, has one of its turbine on the canal, of many that they have. And also, once you get here, you'll notice that there's a lot of empty space, and we'll talk about that next.
Now, this is quite the hub of mills. What happened to them?
Yes, it's mostly barren, which is very unusual, because if you go to the first level canal, it's filled. If you go to the north end of the second level canal, it's filled. If you go to the third level canal, it's filled with mills. But the juncture between the second and third level canal was filled with mills almost right from the inception. So in 1860, it was filled with mills, and they're gone. They've been taken down either because Interstate 391 came through, or they were taken down because they're just rotted in place or needed for something else. But they used to be here, the Holyoke Paper Mill, General Electric. There used to be the Germanium Mill number 1. Used to be Connor Silk here also. And there was one more mill, and you can also see in the distance there were several more mills. Germania 2 is there, both Merricks are here. There's what became the Berkshire Yarn Company is still there. And you can see on Sargent Street the Parsons Mill and the Dickinson Mill. So it was a hub, and then one ring further on it was a hub when those mills are still in place, but the original hub is gone. And that's sad to see because, first of all, there was a mill called the Holyoke Paper Mill, and hardly anyone knows much about that mill. I know one thing very important about that mill is William Wyden, who became a leader paper dealer in Holyoke, started as an accountant in the Holyoke Paper Mill, and then he said, I can do this myself, and he started up his own enormous paper mill, the biggest paper mill in the United States. So this is a great place to see history in action. It's also great, just when you go down there, to look at the Merrick and see the enormous arched tunnel coming out and exposed.
Now, so thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune into a large selection of other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about any other questions at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. And thank you for tuning in. And so today he'll be talking about the Merrick Lumberyard. So where was the Merrick Lumberyard located?
Okay, it was close to the Merrick 2 and 3. It was near the freight yard of the train station, near the first train station, not the second. And there is a little place, but it made a lot of lumber. And by saying it was there, it was also in Maine because they own the forest in Maine. And so along the way, we're going to talk about why Timothy Merrick, the owner, started up this lumber yard. And then what they made there was an incredible amount of products. And then about Merrick mills in general in Holyoke, because there were 4 mills and 1 lumber yard. So what were they up to? That's a great question. Now this Merrick also, Timothy Merrick, bought up a whole forest in Maine because he made so many spools for thread for his own company and for other companies. So we're going to talk about why he's doing all this stuff. The Merrick was started up in 1881, and it grew incredibly fast.
And why did Timothy Merrick start up a lumberyard?
Okay, he came up from Maysville Hollow, Connecticut, I believe in the year 1863, got his mill going by 1864, and he's a maker of cotton thread, and he had 4 mills in Holyoke. Mill 1 is on the upper part of Main Street. Across the street is mill number 4, and mill number 2 and 3. 2 is the only one that's gone. 3 is still there. Those are on Appleton Street between the first and second level canal. And he started up a lumber yard because he needed so many wooden spools of all different sizes. The small one that a housewife might use in a home, the medium-sized one that a seamstress might use for a small business, the large ones that other clothes makers might use when they make clothes and they need the cotton thread. So he started up a lumber yard and made an incredible amount of products there. So we'll be talking about that. Now remember that this is just a sideline to him, and yet it became extremely successful and self-sufficient by itself. He owned a gorgeous mansion where the Blessed Sacrament Church is now, and he got extremely rich. And we're going to talk about all these big products in a second.
And quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, what was made at the Merrick Lumberyard?
Well, this is an incredible topic because they can make a lot of incredible things, including custom-made items. So they had the ability to take in any work and cut down with their planers right down to what you wanted. And they used all kinds of wood. So they used pine, spruce, chestnut, oak, ash, cherry, black walnut, southern pine, and they made anything you want to. So they made floors and shingles and laths and pickets. They made lots of turn-ins for the stairs inside your house. They made doors and sashes and blinds. They made chests and water tanks and anything that even up to those are mostly household uses. They also made materials for the mills around Holyoke. So they had dye tubs, and they could make any strong support you needed. They had all kinds of machinery, including jigsaws, a bandsaw, a turning saw, a match saw, a plane saw, and they could do all this machinery, whether you're on a small little place or a medium-sized store or a giant mill. And so they were great. Mostly they were making what they wanted, though, and that was the spools used for thread to be placed on it, whether small, medium, or large, including for their own mills and for other mills. So they were spool makers, too.
And what did the rest of the Merrick do?
Okay, the rest of the Merrick thread mills, they made thread, and lots of it. 1 million miles of thread per year. That would reach to the moon and back, so four times the distance to the moon. They made every year. They are the biggest thread makers in the United States. And they had 4 mills going. Merrick number 1 was their main production site and the administration site. Merrick 4 was their storage site. That was across the street from Merrick 1. Merrick 2 and 3 took on most of their production, and they were of course between the first and second level canal, and used a lot of canal power to make the machinery go. And so this Merrick lumberyard itself got its own power from coal burn in the beginning, and then from electricity, but the rest of the Merrick worked off the canals. So the Merrick company and the Merrick family was incredible. Now, Timothy Merrick said at the end of his life, 1902, he told his son not to sell his companies to the competition, but to keep them running. And within months, his son did not listen to him. He sold it to the competition. So this great company went to nothing.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours.